Hi, my name is Trina Van. I'm the Homeless Services Coordinator with Arlington County. Thanks for joining us. This is one of two recorded webinars we're offering in advance to some of our upcoming strategic planning community input sessions. Today's session is an introduction to our community's continuum of care. Really, our goal for today is to help folks have a better understanding of what our current efforts are to prevent and end homelessness in advance of participating in those community input sessions. We'll cover an overview of the continuum of care, our local priorities and activities. We'll be reviewing a little bit of our system performance data and talking about root causes of homelessness before closing up and looking ahead to where we're going next. I mentioned I'm the Continuum of Care Coordinator for Arlington County. I'll let Ayana and Brandy introduce themselves next.
I'm Ayana Bellamy. I am the Director of Federal and State Housing Programs with Path Forward, and I'm also the CoC Executive Committee Chair.
Hello, my name is Brandy Howard. I'm the Director of Housing and Homeless Services with Doorways, and I'm also the Chair of the Data and Evaluation Committee.
Thanks. So Ayana, I think we'll turn it over to you for the overview of the CoC.
All right, I'm here to give you guys an overview of the continuum of care. So what is the continuum of care? The CoC is what we call it for short, and it's just used to describe the various functions and roles of the homeless response system we have in Arlington County. The governing, organizing, and the planning body that works to establish and align the priorities and resources, as well as the policies to address homelessness within our region, which is Arlington County. We have the collective resources that are utilized to really address homelessness using prevention, outreach, shelter, and of course, permanent housing. DHS, being the lead entity, is delegated with all the responsibilities for meeting any of the applicable federal and state responsibilities. And who is the CoC? We just put this slide in here so everyone can really get a grasp of who all is a part of the CoC, which is nonprofit partners, as well as other community partners within our Arlington County and affordable housing, as well as public schools. And we're really working on getting more community advocates as well, people with lived experience that live in the community and can really bring some valuable insight. And of course, DHS, as they serve as the lead agency for the CoC. This is our current we have our current strategic plan, and this is our mission, which we are working on revising our mission. But we wanted to include this here, just really kind of focusing on sustainability and really addressing the homelessness and trying to end homelessness. Our original 10-year plan is where our mission and everything really kind of originated from. And like I mentioned before, we are really working on trying to develop and update our strategic plan, but of course, focusing on affordable housing, the comprehensive supportive services that are offered throughout the county, prevention, as well as income maximization. And our current areas of particular need, which is racial equity, employment, recidivism, family homelessness, youth homelessness, immigrant households, and domestic violence. And we put this here just so you all can see the pathways that when someone enters the system. So they would start with the centralized access system, which is at DHS. Through the interventions at DHS, they do try to divert someone from becoming homeless if possible, and prevent them from becoming homeless if possible. And then, of course, if those options are not on the table, then we will refer to shelter. And from shelter, they'll be referred to one of the appropriate housing programs, which would be permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, which will ultimately get them to the end goal, which is stable permanent housing. And I will pass it off to you, Brandy.
All right, so as you can see in FY22, we had a upkeep in the number of families who came into shelter. So for rapid rehousing, if you look at FY21, you can see there's a significant increase in the number of families who came into shelter. And a lot of this is because in FY20 and 21, we were still receiving funds from the rent relief program and COVID dollars. We're trying to help people stay housed. There weren't as many people coming into shelter as in the previous 2 years. If you look on the family side, particularly, when you look at FY21, you will see that there were 102 families served or clients served for the year. And looking at FY22, we were at 92 families for Q1 and 2. So there's a drastic intake in the number of families who need shelter for FY22 going into FY23. Permanent supportive housing has stayed consistent throughout the past couple of years. Although permanent supportive housing is a big need in the community, we need additional funding to ensure that our families are able to go into permanent supportive housing and get that stability that they need with permanent housing.
Brandy had also also note that in FY22, our rapid rehousing numbers increased, and that was part of our both the resources we were able to get from the CARES Act in particular through the state, otherwise known as CHIRP for some of our local grantees, but that really allowed people to exit from homelessness more quickly into permanent housing, which allowed us to free up space also in our shelter, which supported, COVID safety measures, reduced number of people in our congregate spaces, reduced the risk of mitigation of COVID in those programs.
So exits to permanent supportive housing, as you can see, those numbers look good in both the emergency shelters across the board. In FY22, there were 94% of the families went into permanent supportive housing, which helped us meet our goal for that year. And then we look at individual for FY22, it's a little bit lower, but I would just attribute that to a need for more permanent supportive housing and resources for individuals who are single. Rents are fairly high in Arlington, and without additional support and resources, a lot of our individuals are not able to maintain permanent housing.
Yeah, and one point of clarification, it was exits to all permanent housing for individuals and families. So while the permanent supportive housing is a huge factor, and a lot of people exit to permanent housing through those means. We also rely heavily on those housing partners that Brandy mentioned. So helping folks get into permanent housing through either rapid rehousing, PSH, or independently even is just really restricted and constrained by our availability of affordable housing, whether the rents are increasing or vacancy rates are dropping. It really impacts our ability to help people exit homelessness.
All right, so median length of stay from fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 22 for rapid rehousing, you can see that our family stayed a maximum of 10 months, and that's attributed to income, child care, needing more case management support to be able to transition to the Arlington County Housing Grant, which is our ongoing subsidy. And I will also say, if you look at the lengths of stay in rapid rehousing, they're up because COVID actually ended, and a lot of families were getting back into the swings of having to work, send their kids back to school, find available childcare. In an emergency shelter, I would say the length of stay was about 4.5 months, and that's a little bit shorter because, as Trina mentioned, the goal was to move families out of shelter because of COVID, to limit exposure to other families. So we were really working hard to get them into permanent housing faster. Recidivism rate, pretty consistent over the last couple of years at 12%. And recidivism is just like breaks in homelessness for our families. And for the most part, it's pretty consistent throughout the last couple of years. We're not seeing families or singles returning to shelter frequently. All right, current performance, what are we looking at? If you look at this slide, Arlington's population is listed in green. And the majority is 75% of the population that is Arlington is white. When you look at the number of the clients coming into shelter, the majority of those are African American or Hispanic, which is not aligned with the population that Arlington sees in the community. So we have to make sure that we have services available for clients who don't represent the norm of what Arlington sees.
Thanks, Brandy. We'll talk a little bit about root causes next, because as we prepare for our community conversations around our next strategic plan, we know as a CoC that we want to address also the root causes of homelessness. As Ayana mentioned, racial equity has been an area of action of our most recent strategic plan. And, Brandy just highlighted some of these racial disparities that we see year over year. This is not just in Arlington alone, but across the country. This pattern is undeniable, it's predictable, and homelessness is a result of institutionalized oppression, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color or BIPOC. This is a brief timeline that was adapted from a much more comprehensive and lengthy one developed by the authors named on the slide. This is really highlighting how the country as we know it today began through colonization, first the genocide of tens of thousands of Indigenous people living on these lands, and then with the enslavement of Africans for the labor and capitalism of wealthy landowning white men. We also see the starts of a homeless response, rooted in poorhouses, shelters, and institutes largely created by white Christian women in hopes of treating and socializing the poor. These practices develop both early standards of care and the establishment of who's worthy of our help. As we move into the mid-1800s and with the abolishment of slavery and the start of the civil rights era, we see new means that are strengthened and reinforced through our legal institutions that deny rights and opportunities to BIPOC communities, whether they're through redlining, lending practices, which literally enforce who can buy homes and where people can live. So while we need to offer a response that addresses people's immediate need for housing, which is exacerbated by other social and personal challenges such as domestic violence, mental health, substance use, lack of income and employment opportunities. In order to end homelessness fully, we need to address it also at its roots and systemic factors that cause it in the first place. It's no surprise that our focus is heavily at responding to the symptoms of the issue. There's both an urgency to respond to the crisis of homelessness and to prevent further traumas that homelessness can cause. So our responses are also rooted in centuries-old doctrines that our fates are in our hands, that if we simply work hard enough and stay on the right course, we can have success as well. But we also know that for many, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, opportunities is marred by oppressive policies, lack of resources and access, which is why during our strategic planning process, we are asking people with lived experience to join us in developing actions and strategies that would be most meaningful for them as they're closest to the problem and the solution. And we want to replace oppressive policies with ones that promote equity. And because oppression is intersectional with other identities such as sexuality, gender, able-bodiedness, it's also intersectional with other systems that support people. And we know we need those partnerships that also promote equity at the systems level. This is a link to some additional resources as part of realizing Arlington's commitment to equity that speaks to both the history and the strategies that are in place locally here in Arlington. And take it away, co-chair.
I'll jump in here to just talk about what we are looking ahead. And of course, our goal, as we've mentioned before, is to end homelessness for all by 2026. How are we going to get there? Well, like I mentioned before, we do have our current mission, but we are working on revising our mission, and our future mission is definitely in development, and we're going to be centering all of our mission statements in regards to around racial equity and really getting those voices from people with lived experience and getting their input to see what needs to happen in order to really move forward. As Trina mentioned, we do have our input sessions, which are scheduled here on this slide. I would just really encourage you all to share the information, share the link. If you live in Arlington County, you know someone that lives in Arlington County. If you're serving any clients that could benefit from these sessions, I would just really, really appreciate if you share this information, encourage them to come and really try to get some input in so we can hear from all in regards to the different populations that we serve in the county. And we just want to thank you for your time, and we hope to hear from you guys soon and see you in the upcoming input sessions that we have. Thank you.